Welcome to the Transform My Dance Studio podcast, the only podcast for dance studio owners, where each week we bring you business growth strategies to help you increase your profits, impact the lives of more students, while ensuring you get back some time to have a little life outside of the studio. It's time for you to become the go-to studio in your area. Now, here's your host, founder of the Dance Studio Owners Association, Clint Salter.
Hey there, dance studio owners. Welcome to the Transform My Dance Studio podcast. It's Clint here, and I am super thrilled that you're joining us for today's episode, because in today's episode, I'm talking with the amazing Trivinia Barber, who is the CEO of Priority VA. Trivinia's mission is to match high-end virtual assistants with business owners and entrepreneurs around the world. She's been an executive assistant for some amazing people and now runs this thriving business. We have got so many questions around VAs, virtual assistants. What are they? What do they do? How can we use them in our dance studio? So, Trivinia, I am so thrilled that you're joining us. Thanks for taking the time.
Oh, well, Clint, you're one of my favorite people on the planet, so it is my pleasure to be here.
Woohoo! So, Trivinia, why don't we start with what is a virtual assistant and how do you help business owners get back their time, essentially?
Yeah. So it's great. It's a really good idea to think about a virtual assistant, not necessarily as a person, but as an industry, because the VA industry really encompasses a lot of things. But to make it simple, a virtual assistant is someone who freelances. They work from their home doing a variety of things. They can be doing more administrative tasks for you, or they can be doing more marketing type tasks for you. But my goal is to place entrepreneurs with virtual assistants that can really offload the day-to-day tasks that they're working on in their business that are keeping them from being the visionary and working on the financial objectives of their business, right? Those money-making tasks. Because we all get so inundated with doing the day-to-day things that we don't ever really get to work on the bigger picture items that can really scale our businesses for us.
Oh, and you're speaking the language of our studio owners. A lot of them are visionaries and are lacking an integrator or someone to help them with these day-to-day activities like admin, like processing invoices, like filling, roles out for classes, whatever it might be. Is it always a right time to get a VA in your business, even if you're just starting out for our studio owners, or do you need to get to a certain place first before you bring someone on board?
Yeah. So, what's so interesting is I spent 3 days in May with some 7 and even 8-figure business owners in California. And I was talking with them, and 100% of them, Clint, told me that they wish they would have gotten help 6 months or 9 months or a year before they actually pulled the trigger to do it. And so one of the things that I realized is that, often we let things like, our fears, like our company, generating enough revenue to afford to get help, or, do I deserve help? I think sometimes we can have those mindset things that we've got to be a martyr, and do it all ourselves. Can I trust somebody? Or all these questions that we'll have in our business. And one thing is consistent across the board is that people often wait too long to get support. And so I would say that those key markers for yourself really need to be, if you're consistently starting to drop the ball, if you're not responding to emails, or you're not maybe being as productive as you used to be because you're scaling and things are just getting too busy, then it is time to start outsourcing something. Now, it doesn't have to be everything, but I do feel like everyone has tasks that they're doing in their business that could be done by someone else that won't impact the bottom line of their business that much.
It's great. I love this. Where do we start though? Do we start by doing an audit of our time to work out what are the lower value kind of tasks that we're doing to then see, okay, these are the things we could shift to someone else and then find that person? Is that the best way to get started?
Yeah, I often give potential clients of mine a homework assignment, a task, if you would, for a week. I ask them to really create a grid that has 4 columns. And I ask them to just, much like if we were taking a nutrition log, right, and logging our meals, to log the tasks that they're doing and to have them go into 4 different columns. The things that they don't know how to do. So this is the stuff that they're looking up on YouTube or they're Googling, right? Maybe how to set up a website or things like that.
Yeah.
Log all of those things that you're doing that you just really don't know what you're doing. And the next column would be the things that you don't have time to do. So this is all the stuff that you might even know how to do it, but it always falls on the back burner. This could actually be things that you enjoy doing, like maybe engaging on social media or writing content or things, but it's just always, kind of back of mind. It gets put to the side. And then the next column would be things that you hate to do. So could be stuff you do know how to do, but you just want to gouge your eyes out every time you have to do it. For me, it would be anything financing and invoicing and things like that. I know how, but I'm not good with numbers. It stresses me out. So that would be like my top bucket list. And then the fourth column is really the things that only you can do. And so, for instance, with you, Clint, today, you can have your assistant draft questions, schedule this appointment, do all those things, but you have to
done.
be right? Yeah, you have to be the one that actually gets on and does this interview, totally, right? So when you start to do that, if you do it, even 3 days would be the minimum that I would do it. But if you'll log those things for 3 days or a week at most, you'll start to develop really an avatar, if we will, of the type of person that you're looking for. You'll start to see that maybe it's all the tech things that you can't do or you don't want to do, or maybe it's content, or maybe it's more marketing or administrative, and you'll kind of develop a person out of it. And it's really fascinating when people will bring those forms back to me. I can very easily identify the type of person that they need and typically how long they would need that person for each week.
I love it. I love that you can then kind of go through that, because my next question was going to be, okay, so we've done this like mini audit. We've got a list of things. We've got a pile of tasks. And a lot of the time, these tasks might be completely different. I mean, can we find one person, and I see this a lot when people talk about, general virtual assistants, is they, give the one person all different things to do, from writing copy to managing social media to doing research, doing book work. I mean, realistically, how should we be kind of thinking about that if our tasks are kind of all over the place?
Yeah. So a few things. We often tease that people want a unicorn, right? They want their graphic designer to be their copywriter and also schedule a hair appointment and buy a gift for my daughter on the way home. And it's not realistic for the long term. And I think that, I was that general virtual assistant for many years where I kind of did expense reporting and hair appointments, and I'd write copy and customer service. And that's great for a while. But as your business grows and scales, two things happen. It becomes too much volume for the virtual assistant. So he or she becomes overwhelmed, right? And secondarily, I think that just like you have your sort of zone of genius or that prodigy zone where you really excel, so does the virtual assistant. And so, I remember doing podcast editing and uploading podcasts for a client for a long time. And one day she asked me, like, is there anything you do in my business that you don't like? And I said, oh, dear God, I hate the podcast. Like, I just want to die. And I did it because we had some turnover and someone left, and it needed to be done. But it stressed me out every Wednesday night. I had so much anxiety because I knew the podcast was dropping on Thursday. Wow. And so while you can have somebody to kind of be all things for a little while, you've got to plan not only financially, but systematically of the different types of positions that you're going to need to fill in your business, and have a plan to maybe separate out content and administration at some point in your business.
Great advice. I love this. So we've done our audit. We know what we need someone to take off our plate. I guess the next kind of point is, finding the person, and also just getting clarity around how many hours do I need this person? And should I, is someone effective at 5 hours or 10 hours? Do they need to be full-time? Do you mind sharing with us? Because I know you've got a lot of clients that you work with now in Priority VA. How do you kind of coach them around that? Where to really start with someone?
Yeah, well, I can tell you that, years ago when we first started, I started doing outsourcing with just, if someone needed 2 hours a week, I would do that. And what I found that was so sporadic and it wasn't enough, and people weren't really getting anywhere with their virtual assistant. And so we bumped that to a minimum of 5 hours a week. Well, I'm 4.5 years in now, and we have actually changed that to a minimum of 10 hours a week, because a few things have to happen. you have to be able to trust the person that you're working with. I mean, it's key. But when you only talk to somebody for, 5 minutes every other, week or so, it's hard to build that rapport and to really hand over the keys, right, to your business.
Totally.
You have to know that that person is getting trained on your system, on your process, on really the way that you do business. And again, that's really hard to do so sporadically. And then the goal of all of that is really to get traction. And if you're only connecting or giving a task here and there, you can't get traction. And so it's only by outsourcing outcomes and not just tasks that people can really get traction in their business. And so Dan Martell, who's a friend and mentor of mine, he says, what we need to do is build teams where we can have someone lead, manage, and be accountable. And so if you can find those different pillars in your business, that you can find someone to lead, manage, and be accountable for an outcome in your business, that is what truly pulls you out of the weeds and helps you focus on the vision. So, I think it's so important that we make sure that anyone we bring on board is going to have the time and the ability to do that for you.
That's perfect advice. And studio owners that are listening, I want you to really pay attention to what Trivinia just mentioned there, because we can carry through that philosophy of being outcome-based and not just task-based to our teachers, to our office team, obviously to our virtual assistant, to our DOFI, our director of first impressions. Everyone inside of our, association, inside of our studio, we can adopt this really strong leadership mentality. Thanks for sharing that. That's a great lesson, Trivinia.
Absolutely.
Where do we find these people? I know that you've got a great service with Priority VA, but for our newbie studio owners, or maybe someone that has all staff that are sitting, at their studio and have never kind of thought, I can get someone that doesn't live in my town that comes to the studio to do these tasks. Can you share a little bit about that?
Yeah. And honestly, that's actually probably one of the best things about our business, right? So, you're in New York now. And if you think about the cost of hiring someone in New York, holy cow, right? I mean, it's expensive.
They're expensive.
You go to small town, rural Iowa, and you find someone who's, kind of been at their home secretly learning all these internet marketing things, you can pay them a fraction of what you might have to pay someone in New York, right? So it's interesting to get creative and think globally instead of just locally, that I have to find someone in Sydney, right? So that's probably the best thing that you can do. But where I suggest that people look for virtual assistants, first and foremost, ask your friends, ask your colleagues, ask someone who is a little bit further down the road from you and that maybe has worked with a virtual assistant before. Recommendations are by far the best way to get a great person. Secondly, I would say ask your audience, right? If you guys have email lists or whatever, maybe email out a job description of what you're looking for, because you might have a rock star in your midst, maybe someone who tried to be a studio owner that just, maybe they failed at that, right? But they're still passionate about what you're doing and they want to help. So that might make the perfect fit for you, right? Because they'll understand you and your industry. And then I would tell you to go on, on Facebook. There's a lot of Facebook groups where you can find virtual support, and then you can use an agency like mine, or you can even go to, there's Upwork and Fancy Hands and a lot of other online places where you can post jobs. There's a site called hiremymom.com that you can go to.
I love that.
Yeah. So there's a whole bunch of places that you can go. The key here would be weeding out, just like, anyone who posts a job, but weeding out the people who aren't the right fit for you, to really get someone who's going to not only have the skills that you need, but also have the character and the temperament, the personality that you look for as well.
Awesome. Are there some common traits, personality types, skills that we want to really be on the lookout for when we're in the recruitment process for a virtual assistant?
Yeah, so we use 2 personality profile assessments in our business, and we're actually starting to use the Colby a little bit more, but historically we've used the DISC and the Strength Finder assessment. And what I found, and it actually really surprised me, and it's probably why I stopped being a virtual assistant and actually, became a business owner instead, is that I would say overwhelmingly, probably 80% or higher of the VAs that are that make it through our gauntlet, which is a 7-stage process that we do to ensure that people know how to do what they say they can, and they have the character and integrity we're looking for. But far and away, over 80% of them have really high I and really high S in their DISC profile. They have virtually no D at all, and are typically mid-level Cs. And I am like a 98 on the D on the DISC profile.
And you were like, whoa, hang on a second.
I thought, okay, wow, I'm in the wrong business. Like I don't need to be a virtual assistant. I need to be running something, right? Because I like to be the boss. And so you've got to figure out who you need. I often tell my clients that if they would send me their assessments, right? If you would be introspective and look at your strengths and your weaknesses, and then we look at those of the virtual assistant and not try and get, a lot of people are trying to get a mini me, right? They just want someone exactly like them.
Yeah.
Well, actually, I feel like it's more detrimental to do that. If you get someone who can complement the weaknesses that you have and really bring those up, that's when you get kind of a match made in heaven, right? So I think skills, you need to make sure that's going to be different for everyone. Personality and attributes will be different as well. I mean, you want someone obviously who's going to be resourceful. You need to have somebody who can get you out of a jam, right? Because they're there to assist you. And you need to have someone who's going to be responsive, very important as well. And then as far as a personality trait, I would encourage everyone to get someone that is going to fit for them. So I can't have a very meek person as an assistant for me because I will run over them. It's just my personality. So I've got to have someone that will stand up to me and say, no, Trivinia, you told me you were going to get these documents to me today and I need them today. And then I'm like, yes, ma'am.
Yeah, rather than someone that is a little bit softer and they go, right. Oh, okay, but then it doesn't get done. And you're like, why did you push me on that?
Exactly. And so you have to know yourself. And, I ask, I think, probably more politically incorrect questions when I'm matching a client and a virtual assistant. I ask the VA to describe to me their ideal client, right? And many of them will say like, I don't want to work with a bully, because sometimes entrepreneurs can be hot-headed. And so I really try to match both of that personality and temperament of the VA and the client. Because in my business, I'm serving two audiences, right? Because I have to keep the VA and the client happy.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. A question that has come up quite often around virtual assistants is pay rates, and I'm assuming, well, I know from my experiences, it's dependent on their skill level as well as where they're located. But do you mind just kind of uncovering a little bit more around pay rates and things for our studio owners to be mindful of when they're negotiating the pay rates with their virtual assistant?
Yeah, so I would tell you that it definitely depends on location. You can get someone, offshore, maybe in the Philippines or India for, $4, $8 an hour, incredibly cheap. And they can do a great job for you, very specifically if you have a lot of rote tasks that are systematized like nobody's business, right? Where they're literally just following a script or, click here type thing. That's great. More US, even sometimes in Australia and Canada, virtual assistants, you can look at starting ranges of $20 all the way up to I've seen some VAs charge $80, $85 an hour.
I hope they're also cooking you dinner and making your bed.
Right? Those are assistants that call themselves OBMs, online business managers. And that's where really they're kind of taking on a mini COO role in a sense of your business. And so, they demand higher pay rates for that. But I would say middle of the road, anywhere from $25 to $45 an hour is probably like what most talented virtual assistants will charge you. But you have to be careful because there are some people that maybe, and I mean no disrespect, but some people that, they worked at Target last month and now they've stumbled upon this virtual assistant thing and they want to be a virtual assistant. And so you've got to make sure that the skill set matches what their pay rate is. And that's hard to do sometimes. And that's why it's important. That's why we do so much testing, on this end so that we can make sure that, they're worthy of the rate that they're charging.
That's great. Really great insight. I appreciate you sharing that. When we've gone through the process and we start working with someone, we get our virtual assistant on board. What are some of the mistakes that you see, business owners making, and maybe some preconceptions that they have or things that they think should work and then don't work? How do we best work with our VA in those really early stages?
I'd say the number one problem that I see business owners make is that I think, maybe subconsciously think that their VA is just sitting behind the computer, hitting refresh, waiting for them to give them a task, right? But they're just available all the time. And that's not true, especially if you think about, my business where we're working 10 hours a week, right? They're not just sitting there all day waiting for you to have them do something. And so they have lives, they have other clients. Many virtual assistants have started this because they want to be at home with their kids, and so, or they want to go on the kindergarten field trip. And so the biggest mistake that you can make is assuming that your VA is at your beck and call 24/7. So have clearly defined hours or times of availability. Many of them are, I would say all of them are subcontractors, right? So they're not actual employees of any organization. They're business owners themselves. And so we can't tell them when you want them to be working. They get to plan their own schedule. They get to use their own tools and do all that. So you can't assume that you own them because you have hired them. So they're a contractor, just like your web designer or just like your plumber that might come to your house. So that's the biggest mistake. And then I would say other things that I see people doing is, again, it's that unicorn mentality of really wanting one virtual assistant who is going to be, planning your child's birthday party for you, because many of them like planning events, but planning a party for you, also, doing HTML coding on your website. So you got to be realistic on the skill set that you're looking for, and don't be shocked when they say like, I can't do that. That's not in my wheelhouse. Just like, maybe you're a dance instructor, you're not a photographer, right? So the same thing.
Yeah, great. Awesome. And then during the journey, because it is virtual, and this is going to be new for a lot of our studio owners that are used to just being able to turn around in the office and saying, hey, Mary, can you go and do this for me? What are some online tools that we could be using with our virtual assistant to make sure there's transparency, to ensure everyone's on the same page? What tips have you got there?
Well, I love to have weekly video meetings with my team. So we say that it's only 15 minutes, but it's 30 most weeks.
Who are we kidding? It's 2 hours.
Yeah, right. I like to use Zoom as my platform of choice because it gives you video options, and it does help you build camaraderie and rapport. Yes. And plus you can see if I give my VA a task or I'm explaining a project or something to her, I can kind of see that glazed look in her eyes. If I'm like, if she, we're not firing on all cylinders at that point, and I can say like, do you understand that? Or do you have any questions? So better than just, via email. So I would definitely have video calls once a week at least, and ask 3 things. What did you work on last week? What's coming down the pipeline for this week? And what are the impediments to progress? Because that's your job as the founder, as the business owner, to remove those impediments to progress for your team. And that's really the position you should be in as a leader. And so ask those questions. You'll get such valuable feedback from your assistant, and then obviously be building relationship. Midweek stuff, we use a software called Slack. SLACK. It's basically kind of, text messaging on steroids, if you think of it that way. Mm-hmm. You can upload files, you can actually make calls from it, and it's great for quick bursts of communication. So I like that. And then for longer term projects, we use a software called Teamwork. I like that because it's a project management software where you can dump in all the projects. But what I like about it most is that it includes timing integration. So anytime my assistant starts working on a project, that timer goes so I can see, okay, why did you spend 2 hours on that project? It was really a 30-minute thing. So it allows me to have transparency in how long things are taking and what's really going on when they're working on my projects. So those are the 3 best tools that I can tell you to use.
God, that's awesome. That's awesome. Look, Trivinia, I've loved this conversation. I could talk to you for such a longer amount of time. Maybe we'll get you back, but tell us, how do people get in touch with you about what you're doing at Priority VA? And tell us a little bit about how the process would work.
Yeah, so priorityva.com is the best way to find me, or on all social channels. I got super lucky with the handle at Trivinia everywhere. So I know, right? That's pretty rare. But the biggest thing that we do really is try to help entrepreneurs figure out not only what they need done, but who they need it done by. And I think that, whether or not you're going to use Priority VA or another service or, do it yourself, knowing those two things are the most critical things that anyone can do. And so, you can sign up for my mailing list. I send out things all the time. I'm actually working on a course right now that will come out in November to help entrepreneurs that really want to do it themselves and can't afford a service to do it for them, to help them find, manage, and train a virtual assistant to work on their team.
Sounds amazing. Amazing. Okay, Trivinia, thank you for sharing so much gold wisdom with our studio owners today. I appreciate you and thanks so much for taking the time.
My pleasure, Clint. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for joining us today. For all the resource links from the show and to receive access to our free dance studio growth training, make sure you visit transformmydancestudio.com.